The Price of Betrayal. Chapter 1. Wind from the Sea. A knife in the back always comes from someone you trust. I learned this lesson in Yemen at the cost of 4 comrades' lives, but for some reason decided that at home, in San Diego, different rules applied. What irony, to survive the hellfire of Al-Hudaydah, only to bleed out in my own kitchen. Though in my case, the blood was metaphorical. The name in the crosshairs: Nathan Kendrick, 43 years old, former Navy SEAL, now a Coast Guard rescue helicopter pilot. My name. The 7th position on Liam O'Reilly's death registry, a sniper with a reputation as a man who never misses. $350,000, the Ghost standard rate for eliminating a complex target with a combat background. A winter storm raged outside the windows. California winters are deceptive. The sea brings not snow, but wind that tears the soul to shreds. Liam, my ghost from the past, watched me through the optics of a VSS sniper rifle, assembled on the roof of an abandoned motel across the street. My hands automatically checked the flight log of upcoming rescue missions, but my brain was counting down the seconds to the inevitable shot. What drives a person who orders a murder? In Victor Devereux's case, a pathological need for complete control. He didn't just want my wife. He couldn't even tolerate the thought of an ex-husband existing somewhere on the periphery of her new life. Nothing should remind Sophia of the past. A tech mogul with a $2 billion fortune doesn't accept half measures. To him, I was simply an obstacle that needed to be removed to obtain the desired trophy without a single scratch. He smells like the sea, Sophia said about Victor, not understanding the cruel irony. I had served 12 years in the Marines, but she never sensed that smell on me. Only the kerosene of helicopter engines and the nauseating mixture of hospital antiseptics she brought home from her clinic. 17 people. That's how many souls I had saved over the past 3 years, pulling them from the icy embrace of the Pacific Ocean. But now there was no one who could save me. It took Liam 14 days to track me down and prepare his position. With surgical precision, he studied my habits, routes, schedule. But there was a variable in his equation he didn't anticipate. I knew he was here. In Al-Hudaydah, we called him the Ghost not because he could become invisible, but because he never left any traces. I wonder what he felt when he discovered that I, his 7th target, was the very man who had dragged him out with a shot-through shoulder from under Houthi fire 12 years ago. My hand reached for the desk drawer. There, under a stack of documents, an envelope awaited its hour. The handwriting was uneven, the letters dancing like aspen leaves in the wind. Nate asterisk. You taught me yourself that duty is the only thing we have left when everything else burns in the flames. My duty now is to the one who pays. 5 days, that's how much I can give you. I'm repaying an old debt, you know what I mean. Take care of your mother in La Jala. Finish your affairs. Don't try to hide, I'll find you anywhere. We both know the price of a saved life. I'm giving you my debt with these 5 days. Ghost. I folded the note and put it in my pocket. Even executioners sometimes show mercy. I don't know if Liam saw how I found his message left on the windshield of my battered Jeep, whether he saw how I checked my watch and realized that my life was now measured not in years or months, but in days. 5 days until the shot that would send me to depths darker than any ocean floor. Somewhere deep in the house, the clock struck 10 in the evening. Sophia was supposed to come by midnight, saying she was delayed at her shift. I knew she was lying. Had known for 3 months, since the very day I noticed the first signs of change: new perfume, strange calls, mysterious smiles when checking messages. I became absolutely certain a month ago when I saw their names together on the registration form at the Pacific Hotel. An affair with a married billionaire. A story as old as time and as banal as a weather report. 5 days, that's enough to turn the hunter into prey. I raised my eyes to the window and nodded slightly toward the motel. Let the ghost think I've accepted my fate. Let him believe I'll dance to his tune for these 5 days, preparing for death like an exemplary condemned man. But Nathan Kendrick was never good at following someone else's script. After all, death is just another mission. Only this time I'm not saving someone else. I'm saving myself. Chapter 2: The Scent of Betrayal. The Golden Shore clinic smelled of money. Not antiseptic or medicines, but money itself. That special mixture of fear, hope, and desperation that makes people shell out tens of thousands of dollars for promises to rid them of wrinkles, excess weight, or potency problems. Sophia came here 3 years ago with a nursing degree and weariness in her eyes from night shifts at the city hospital. She came and stayed, like one stays in a golden cage, first admiring the shine of the bars, then forgetting what it's like to fly. I sat in my car across from the clinic, watching the last minutes of my former life melt away. Time is a strange thing. In battle, it stretches like chewing gum, but in peaceful life, it slips through your fingers, leaving only traces of wrinkles on your face. "You're never home," Sophia said 3 months ago when I returned from another shift, smelling of salty wind and the fear of those I had pulled from the water. But it wasn't about my absence. She simply no longer cared about my stories of saved lives, of capsized boats and broken destinies. She wanted something else, the glamour I couldn't give her. In my wallet, I kept a worn photograph, Sophia on our wedding day 9 years ago, with a sparkle in her eyes and a promise of eternal love on her lips. Back then, she still valued the stability and reliability I could offer. But years passed, and my modest salary as a rescue pilot didn't allow us to move to the neighborhood she dreamed of. Between calls, I took extra shifts, trying to save for a better house, but the money went to my mother's care. Cancer left no chance for inexpensive treatment. Something changed at the clinic. Jessica, her colleague with a doll's face and snake's eyes, started taking Sophia to exclusive parties where wealthy clients looked at the medical staff as part of the interior, an expensive decoration that could be bought if desired. That's where she met him, Victor Devereaux, a tech mogul with a questionable reputation and impeccable manners. I had only seen him in photos in business magazines and on Sophia's phone screen, which she forgot to lock a month ago. 37 years old, black hair with early gray at the temples, whiskey-colored eyes, and a habit of getting everything he wanted. He looked at my wife like one looks at an item in a store window and decided she should belong to him. Through the clinic's glass, I could see her moving between offices, light gait, loose chestnut hair, a white coat accentuating her figure. She didn't notice me, didn't see anything around her. Her gaze was fixed on the wall clock. She was waiting for the end of her shift to fly into the arms of a man who behind my back called her husband a helicopter pensioner. "He just can't give you the life you deserve," Jessica had said, thinking I couldn't hear. They stood in the kitchen while I had returned early from a call. "Think about it, Soph. You're 29 and you're living like an old woman in this suburb with a husband whose eyes only see sky and sea. And then there's his sick mother, on whom all the money is spent." Jessica knew where to hit. Sophia grew up in a trailer park in Arizona with a waitress mother and a succession of uncles who disappeared after their first binge. She vowed she would never return to that life, that she would live beautifully, and I couldn't give her that beauty. The clinic door opened and Sophia came out, taking off her coat as she walked. I slid lower in my seat. It wasn't time for our meeting yet. We would definitely talk, but not now. First, I needed to understand how deeply she was mired in this swamp. A black Maserati pulled up to the curb, arrogant and loud, just like Devereaux himself. Sophia slipped into the passenger seat, and her lips stretched into a smile she hadn't given me for many months. Long ago, I thought, following them at a safe distance, people believed you needed to know a devil's name to have power over him. Now I knew my devil's name. I just needed to find out how deeply he had penetrated my life. They drove to the coast, to those exclusive areas of San Diego where even the air seems filtered from the problems of ordinary mortals, where every house is a fortress with an ocean view, and every car costs more than I earn in a year. The Maserati stopped at the gates of the private club Pacific Breeze, a place where people like me are only allowed as service staff. Sophia fluttered out of the car, and Devereaux placed his hand on her waist with the possessive gesture of a man confident in his right. I remained in my Jeep, parking across the street. They couldn't hide further, security wouldn't let a stranger in. But I didn't need to enter. I had already seen enough. My phone vibrated. A message from the dispatcher. "Nate, we have a call. Fisherman in trouble 20 miles offshore." Work was calling, and it was almost a relief. A few more hours of reprieve before the inevitable. I started the engine and, casting one last glance at the club gates, drove to the helipad. Someone would be luckier than me today. They would be pulled from the cold water. But I would have to swim out of this mess on my own. In front of the house, well after midnight, I saw a note from Sophia. "Night shift. We'll be back in the morning." Lies flowed from her like blood from an open wound. The only shame was that in this situation, I was the one dying, not her. Chapter 3 Countdown. Day 1 of 5. The ghost had given me this reprieve, and I intended to use every minute. The morning began with a trip to my mother at the Sunset by the Sea nursing home in La Jolla. Cancer was devouring her from within with the same ruthlessness with which time devours everything around. At 72, she looked all of 90, withered, with parchment skin and eyes clouded by morphine. "Nate, honey, you look tired," she whispered when I sat by her bed. Even now, on death's threshold, she saw right through me. "Just a lot of work, Mom." "You were always a bad liar," she smiled weakly. "Your father couldn't lie either. Perhaps that's why he left. He couldn't tell me the truth about his new woman to my face." I took her hand, as light as a bird's wing. "I just wanted to make sure you're all right." "What kind of all right can a dying old woman be?" she chuckled. "But I'm not complaining. I've lived my life. But you're here because you're preparing for something. I see it in your eyes. The same look you had before deploying to Yemen." Mother had always been unnervingly perceptive. I left a check for a substantial amount with the administrator for special care, and a promise to return in a couple of days. A promise I might not be able to keep, but one I had to make. The next stop was the bank. I transferred all my savings to my mother's account, paid off loans, updated my will. My death should not become a financial catastrophe for her. For the past 3 years, I had been paying medical bills, sacrificing my own comfort and Sophia's dreams of a better life. Now that Mother was close to the end of her journey, I wanted to ensure her final days would be cloudless, at least financially. Let the ghost see how I'm preparing for the end. Let him believe I'm meekly waiting for the bullet. This was part of my plan, to appear broken, doomed. And then there was the Quiet Haven orphanage on the city outskirts, a place where orphans waited for families that would likely never come. I brought books, sports equipment, toys, made a donation, anonymously, so no one would link this charity to my expected death. I knew Liam was observing somewhere. Not himself, he couldn't be everywhere at once, but his eyes were everywhere. Maybe street cameras, maybe random passers-by with phones. In the modern world, it's practically impossible to hide. In the evening, I returned home and put on a show for my would-be killer. At exactly 11:00 p.m., I sat in the chair by the office window, turned on the desk lamp, picked up a book. My shadow was clearly projected on the curtains, a perfect target for a shooter. I sat motionless, only occasionally turning the pages of Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, a story about a man who fought fate until his last breath. Sophia didn't return that night either, but it no longer bothered me. My thoughts were occupied elsewhere. I was methodically preparing a trap into which the ghost had to fall. On the third day, I bought a mannequin from a closing theatrical supply store. Spent hours giving it the right pose, exactly the same one in which I sat each evening by the window. Dressed it in my old home shirt, placed it in the chair, fitted it with reading glasses. In the darkness, by lamplight, Even an experienced sniper couldn't distinguish this mannequin from a living person. I knew the ghost would choose the abandoned auto shop across the street. Perfect position, a dilapidated building with broken windows, direct visibility to my office, convenient angle for a shot. 230 meters, a child's distance for a marksman of his class. The day before the appointed deadline, I finally discovered how deep the story with Devereux went. One of the rescue service dispatchers, a gossip lover, told me about strange rumors. Allegedly, a hitman known as the Ghost was seen in the city, working for some local rich man. And the target was some helicopter pilot whose wife was having an affair with a big shot. Sounds like a cheap thriller, I laughed, though everything inside me tightened at the confirmation of my worst fears. In the evening, I called my old contact from the Marines, Manuel Ortega, who after service had chosen a questionable path and now had connections with Mexican cartels in the border zone. The conversation was brief and businesslike. "I need your help, brother, and people who know how to keep their mouths shut." "How many?" "5, and a place for a couple of days in the desert. Your plot in Baja." "Nate, what have you gotten yourself into?" "Into something that won't leave traces, for anyone, and I also need access to private aviation." He was silent, then sighed. "You saved my ass in Hadramaut. Consider us even. I have a man in the dispatch service at San Diego International Airport. What needs to be done?" On the 5th day, as the clock hands inexorably approached midnight, I was already waiting on the second floor of the auto shop. I had climbed in at pre-dawn twilight when the city was still asleep, settled in a dark corner where rusty beams created a perfect hideout, and waited. The mannequin in the office of the house across the street sat in its eternal vigil, illuminated by a desk lamp. From a distance, the illusion was perfect. No one would suspect a substitution. At 11:15 p.m., a floorboard creaked. Quietly, almost inaudibly, but in the hollow emptiness of the abandoned building, the sound spread like a gunshot. Liam moved like a shadow, smoothly, silently. I watched as he methodically prepared his position, rolled out a mat, assembled the rifle, checked the scope. Every movement of the sniper was refined, professional. Not a single unnecessary gesture, not a single random sound. Liam had always been like this, a perfectionist to the core. In Yemen, this trait had saved our hides more than once. 11:45 p.m. The Ghost lay down behind the rifle, pressing to the scope. His breathing became measured, his pulse must have slowed, a sniper's meditation before the shot. I remembered this state from the long hours of observation in the Hadramaut Mountains. The shot tore through the night silence like a whiplash. In the house across the street, glass shattered, the mannequin jerked and fell to the side, just as a real person would have fallen after taking a bullet to the head. Liam raised himself to assess the result through the scope. This was the moment I had been waiting for. In one motion, I crossed the distance between us, and the cold steel of a combat knife pressed against his throat. "There won't be a confirmation shot, Ghost," I said quietly. "Game over." He froze. His hand slowly released the rifle, his fingers unclenched. "Nate," the sniper's voice was hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken for several days. "I should have guessed. You were always one step ahead." Just like the good old days, I slightly eased the pressure of the blade but didn't remove it. Only back then, we were on the same side of the barricades. What changed, brother? $350,000, Liam replied after a pause. "My standard rate for a target with a military background, plus a bonus for urgency, from a man who wants your wife." Victor Devereux. The very one, an eccentric jerk with a god complex. He doesn't just want Sophia. For him, you're an obstacle that needs to be completely eliminated. He's not one who tolerates even the shadow of an ex-husband. I felt something break inside. To hear confirmation of my worst suspicions from someone I once trusted with my life, there's no worse torture. "And why did you give me 5 days?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I couldn't shoot you in the back without warning. Not after Hadramount. Not after you dragged me out with a bullet in my shoulder from that hell. Understand, it's just a job. The professional code doesn't allow me to break my duty to the client, but I could pay my personal debt to you with these 5 days." I slowly removed the knife. You know what's the worst part? I thought I would die on a mission. Crash in a helicopter, drown while saving someone, fall from a cliff. But it turned out that the most terrible danger isn't the elements or technology. The most terrible danger is betrayal by those you trust. We stood in the darkness of the abandoned building, two warriors who once fought shoulder to shoulder, now finding themselves on opposite sides of the front line. Liam was the first to break the silence. "What now, Nate? Going to turn me into the police?" I looked at my former partner with a long, appraising gaze. In my head, a plan had already formed, cruel and elegant at the same time. "No," I finally answered. "I have a better idea. How about working off your debt and teaching a lesson to a selfish billionaire and an unfaithful wife? You're a professional, right? You can't not complete your job. I'll help you with that. And you help me." Chapter 4: A Perfect Death. The blood needs to look real. Liam mixed chemicals in a plastic container. In Hadramount, I saw enough to know how it spreads on walls. I nodded, examining the ballistic gel we were using to imitate the entry wound from a bullet. Makeup and special effects weren't the most difficult part of our plan. Much more important was to position the body correctly and calculate the angles. Everything had to correspond to a shot from the auto shop. Remember that guy in Sanaa? Liam worked on the artificial blood solution, adding special thickeners. The director who was making propaganda videos. Ahmed, I chuckled, thought he'd become the Arab Spielberg. He taught me a couple of tricks, said a convincing death is an art. We worked methodically like we used to in special forces. Every movement measured, every detail thought through. I watched Liam's hands. They were still a sniper's hands, precise and confident, though now they were creating an illusion of death rather than death itself. "Head a little to the left." Liam adjusted the mannequin that was supposed to represent my body. "That way it'll look like you collapsed after the hit. Entry wound here." He pointed to a spot just above the right temple. I would have aimed exactly here. Clean, quick, 100% result. "Nice to know you planned my murder so thoroughly," I snorted. "Professional ethics," Liam shrugged, but something like guilt flashed in his eyes. We spent an hour creating the crime scene. Blood spatter on the wall, exactly like what a 7.6 tomb bullet leaves when it hits the head. An overturned chair, scattered papers. Everything had to suggest that the victim didn't expect the attack. "Now for the photographs." Liam took out a professional camera. "Devereaux will definitely demand proof. He doesn't fully trust me, or anyone for that matter." We took a series of shots from different angles. Liam worked like a forensic expert, documenting every detail. I looked at the photographs of my staged death and felt a strange detachment, as if looking at frames from a movie. "You know what's most important in these matters?" Liam reviewed the resulting images. "Details. Small, seemingly insignificant trifles that create the overall picture. They convince more than any loud statements." We worked until dawn, perfecting each element. It was like our old missions, the same thoroughness in planning, the same attention to details. Only now we weren't killing, but creating an illusion of death. "Now we just wait." Liam examined the murder photos. "Let their conscience do the rest, or what's left of it." The police, arriving at the call of concerned neighbors, quickly came to the obvious conclusion. This was a professional job, clearly a murder, and the body had been hidden somewhere yet to be found. Too clean, too neat. Soon Sophia arrived too. "Mrs. Kendrick," Detective Rivera gently touched the sobbing widow's shoulder. "I'm very sorry, but we need to ask a few more questions." She sat on the living room couch, crumpling a silk handkerchief with trembling fingers. Around her, crime scene technicians bustled, photographing blood spatter on the walls and collecting evidence. "I don't understand," she sobbed. "Who could he have bothered? He was so ordinary." A hidden camera in the chandelier recorded her every movement, every fake tear. I watched the broadcast from a neighboring house I had rented under a false name. Watched as the woman who had shared 9 years of life with me played the role of a grief-stricken widow, and did it surprisingly well. Victor Devereaux appeared only in the evening when the police had finished their work. Tall in a $5,000 suit, he radiated an aura of power and superiority. "Sophia," he knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "I rushed over as soon as I heard. I'm so sorry." She buried her face in his shoulder, and her body shook with sobs. Detective Rivera tactfully turned away. "I can't stay here," Sophia whispered several hours later when she and Victor were alone. The house was empty, quiet, only the yellow police tape on the front door reminded of the tragedy. Every corner, everything. "You need time," Victor poured her a glass of wine. "Time and a change of scenery." "Where should I go? What should I do?" "I have a suggestion." He sat down next to her and a fire lit in his eyes. "A little trip, just you and me. My villa in Cabo." The next morning they were already at the airport. The private terminal gleamed with chrome and glass, with attentive staff bustling around. Sophia, in dark glasses and with a small suitcase, looked like a woman ready to start a new chapter in her life. "Mr. Devereaux," the terminal administrator looked genuinely distressed. "Your plane has technical problems, but we can offer an alternative, a small charter, very reliable company." Victor frowned. "How reliable?" "The pilot is ex-military, vast experience. New Cessna citation, regularly serviced." "Fine," Devereaux waved his hand dismissively. "Go ahead." Behind the scenes of this performance were $50,000 transferred to Manuel's man in the dispatch service, and another 30 to the head of a private airline who agreed to not notice the crew substitution. On the plane gaining altitude over the Pacific Ocean, they made plans. Victor talked about a future mansion in Malibu, about travels, about a new life free from the past. Sophia listened, and in her eyes shone that very expression I once loved so much, hope for happiness. Only now that hope was not connected to me. "Imagine," she adjusted a stray strand of hair. "Yesterday I was locked in a cage, and today I'm flying toward freedom." Victor kissed her fingers. "No more cages, only the life you dreamed of." Somewhere over the Mexican border, the weather began to deteriorate. The plane entered a zone of turbulence, noticeably shaking, and then the co-pilot entered the cabin. "Excuse me," his voice sounded professionally calm. "We have some technical issues. We'll have to make a forced landing to check the systems." "What do you mean forced?" Devereaux frowned. "Where?" "There's a small private airfield nearby. It will take a couple of hours, no more." Sophia squeezed Victor's hand. "Everything will be fine. The main thing is that we're together." Chapter 5: Desert Justice. The private airfield in the Mexican Baja Desert looked like a set for a drug cartel film. A weathered terminal, cracked concrete runway, rusty hangars around the perimeter. The perfect place for what was about to happen. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are making an emergency landing." The voice of the co-pilot, who was none other than Liam, sounded absolutely calm. Victor Devereaux irritably adjusted his tie. Any deviation from the plan irritated him. "It's nothing serious, darling," Sophia stroked his hand. "We'll be in Cabo soon, just you and me, a luxurious villa, the ocean." "And no helicopter pensioner," Victor kissed her fingers. "Just our future." The landing gear touched the concrete, raising a cloud of dust. The plane slowly taxied to the half-ruined terminal, near which 3 black SUVs were already parked. Sophia shuddered. Something in this picture seemed wrong. "What the hell is going on here?" Devereaux straightened abruptly. his usually self-confident face distorted with anxiety. The pilot's cabin door opened. Sophia saw me first and turned so pale that she seemed about to faint. I stood in the doorway, taking off my pilot's cap with such a mundane gesture as if I had just returned from a regular flight. "My God," she whispered, clutching at the armrest, "this can't be." "Why not, dear?" I smiled, but knew my eyes remained cold. As they say, the rumors of my death were greatly exaggerated. Mark Twain, remember. You always laughed at my habit of quoting the classics. "You should be dead," Devereaux shouted, his face white with rage. "I saw the photos. I paid $350,000 for my head." I shook my head. "You know, Victor, for a tech genius, you're surprisingly bad at understanding people. My life is worth much more, but how much is yours worth? We'll soon find out." Armed men entered the cabin. Their leader, Manuel, nodded to me like an old acquaintance. "Manuel," I introduced him, "my business partner. We served together in the Marines and now he has diversified his interests. Here in Baja, he has his own territory, respected even by federal agents." Liam appeared from the cockpit. Sophia didn't know him, but Devereaux recognized him instantly. "You damn traitor." "Traitor?" Liam smirked. "Funny to hear that from a man who ordered a hit on his lover's husband. You know what's really ironic? You didn't even bother to check my background. If you had dug just a little deeper, you would have learned that Nate and I served together." "In Yemen," I added. "He pulled me out from under fire with a broken leg, and I pulled him out with a bullet in his shoulder a week later. Such things aren't forgotten, right, Ghost?" Sophia finally found the strength to speak. "Nate, God, I can explain everything." "Really?" I turned to her, and she recoiled as if from a blow. "Explain to me why you decided that my death would be a good beginning for your new life. Why you decided that 9 years of marriage could be thrown away like garbage for the first billionaire who came along with pretty words." "You don't understand." She jumped up, her eyes filling with tears. "You were always so proper. Everything by regulation, everything by instruction. I was suffocating in this life. And Victor, he showed me another world. And I didn't know that I really didn't know he was planning to kill you. A world where you can order a hit on someone for $350,000. I shook my head. "Wonderful new world, I must say. A world where a sick mother is a burden, not a person who needs care." "I loved you," she whispered, sinking back into her seat. "No, Sophia, you loved the idea of me. While I was a Navy SEAL, a hero with medals, you were proud of me. When I became an ordinary rescuer who spent money on treating his mother instead of a vacation in Europe, I stopped meeting your expectations. What did you and your new friend call our life? A doghouse." "Very touching family scene," Devereaux interjected, trying to regain control of the situation. "You understand this won't go unpunished. I have connections all along the coast, the best lawyers, politicians in my pocket." "If you get out of here alive," I cut him off. "Manuel, he's yours. His family will pay a good ransom." "How much?" the Mexican asked in a businesslike manner. "Start with 5 million. If the relatives are stubborn, well, show them how serious you are." Devereaux's eyes widened with horror. He was led out at gunpoint. He tried to keep his composure, but his expensive suit was already soaked with sweat, and animal fear splashed in his eyes. "And what about her?" Manuel nodded toward Sophia. "Nate, please." She fell to her knees, grabbing my hand. "It was all Jessica. She dragged me into this circle of rich clients. If only I had known. I was a fool. Give me one more chance." I carefully freed my hand. "A chance? You know what's the scariest thing, Sophia? I would have forgiven you for the affair. I could even have survived a divorce. But I can't be sure you didn't know about your billionaire's plans to kill me. It wasn't me, it's all Victor. And you were just standing by, dreaming about how you'd spend his millions over my grave." I shook my head. "Manuel, I think this woman at some point decided that her beauty was worth more than honor. Do you have work for her?" There's always work, Manuel grinned. No, Sophia screamed as they grabbed her. Nate, you can't do this to me. I'm your wife. You were, I turned to the window. Till death do us part. Remember those words. True, the death turned out to be fake, but the result is the same. Her screams echoed in my ears for a long time, even after the heavy barracks door slammed shut. I stood at the plane stairs, watching as the jeeps dissolved into the desert dust. Liam handed me a flask of whiskey. You know, the sniper sat on a step of the stairs. In Hadramaut, we once discussed what's scarier, a bullet or betrayal. Remember? I remember, I took a sip. You can dodge a bullet, betrayal, no. And now what? Now, I looked at the sunset sky, colored like blood. Now home to Mother. Her days are numbered and I want to be with her till the end. Gave her my word. And after that? We'll see. They say time heals all wounds. Even ones like these. We'll find out. I climbed the stairs. Start the engines, Ghost. Time to go back. The plane took off into the darkening sky. Below stretched the desert, resembling a frozen sea of rust. It held many secrets, now one more. A story about love, betrayal, and retribution. A story about how not all fairy tales end with a wedding, and justice doesn't always look like it does in Hollywood films. Course for San Diego, I commanded, fastening my seatbelt. I didn't know what awaited me at home, but I knew one thing for certain. Sometimes you need to lose everything to understand what truly matters. And right now, for me, it was the chance to spend the last weeks with the woman who really loved me unconditionally, my mother.